Hello everyone, welcome to another Eternal Contenders video series here on my channel. Today I got a spicy one for you. It's a fairly new brew that started popping up on ladder. It's called Combrei Plate, aka Voltron as I tend to call it, because the plan is basically to assemble a big, preferably Aegis unit with a couple of weapons on it. Best one being Deepforged blade to ride that guy to victory, basically, just like the good old Voltron. My version is a bit different from what I've seen online so far, as a lot of the time. So I'll go over my version and explain why I play the cards I play and why I don't like some of the other things that I've seen. Alright, so first off, the lists I've seen don't play Initiate of the Sands, maybe because they think they cannot support it or it's not worth it or whatever. I think that's wrong. I think it helps the deck speed up quite a bunch. There's draws where you can go Initiate into Awakened Student plus Empower it. If you happen to have Seed of Progress as your first land. Then there is draws where you can go turn 2 Siraf or Familiar, and then curve that into one of the 4-drops, for example, which is great. You can also make up for lack of power draws. It's all in all just better than the Ember Acolytes that I see in other lists, because the deck basically already has a million 3-drops, and between Initiate of the Sands, Seek Power, and Power, I'm on 32 power, while the lists with Acolyte that I've seen are usually on 30 or 31 power, playing 2 to 3 Acolytes and 3 Seek Power and 25 power cards. So yeah, I think Initiative Ascent is pretty good. The deck has less turn 1 time than other Initiative Ascent decks have, but it still has a decent amount. We have 5 and those 8, 13, which is a bit on the low end, but sometimes it can also be good to just, with the slower draws, like turn 1 depleted land, you can go turn 2 Initiate plus one of these two or another depleted land if you happen to have drawn a lot of seeds, and then accelerate that into a 4-drop on turn 3, or simply on a 3-drop on turn 3 if you happen to have another depleted source. Then you can at least make up for that with the Initiate, basically curving Initiate as a 2-drop into a 3-drop, which is still better because the power development can be a bit bumpy at times and there can be depleted heavy draws depending on how your draws turn out. Then we have Seek Power, which is an absolute must for triple color decks, basically, since it is the only card aside from Diplomatic Seal that can fix all 3 colors at once. And the problem with Seal here would be we already have so many banners and seeds that it would make them even worse, and we have some heavier requirements where for once Seal wouldn't be that good, because if we're still missing like a second green or a second red for our blade and draw a mid-game Seal, that won't help us. So this is one of the fewer decks where Seal is not a really good fit, because we have heavy requirements in various colors in various stages of the game, including our splash. Yeah, then we have 4 Torch. That's just pretty universal and one of the most appealing cards to splash. If we're already splashing for a double red 5-drop, we might as well play Torch as well. Then we have the 2-drops, Student, just because it's the best Combrei 2-drop premium card, grows as the game progresses, therefore scales really well into the late game compared to other early drops that get outclassed quickly. Then we have Crownwatch Paladin, our first Aegis unit, also has Warcry, which makes our later cards scale better and enhances our weapons. but has the problem, unlike Student, that it scales pretty poorly into the late game without weapon enhancements, and even with say staff or hammer, it still loses to a Sandstorm Titan, which can be problematic. And last but not least, we have 3 Desert Marshal in the 2-drop slot. Only 3, just because we're gonna skip our 2 occasionally thanks to Initiate, and we only have so much room. So 3 is a fine number, and drawing multiples of this guy is not always that beneficial anyway, because the 2-1 body is a bit low impact. But it's nice that it has ambush, can be played end of turn after a harsh rule, for example, to get to our turn and equip it with the weapon to keep hitting the opponent, for example, and stuff like that, and surprise the opponent in combat by silencing critical stuff. Next we have the typical 3 Vanquish that you see in most green decks. Just a great answer and necessary to deal with cards like Titan and some of the annoying flyers like Doom and Reaper and stuff like that. Just a good removal. Also deals with other big weapon enhanced and Warcry enhanced units in Rakano. Then we have the 3-drops for Siraf, just because Siraf is just great. 3/4 is great stats, Overwhelm is great synergy with the weapons, and if we ever flooded, this is our flood protection. Can easily dominate the late game if we draw a couple too many power cards. Then we have Familiar. The next Aegis guy also has Lifesteal, which makes him great in races, and Flying, which makes him pretty hard to stop even with the smaller weapons that also don't give Overwhelm. So yeah, this is our main racing tool, basically combined with weapons. Also curves really well into Hammer of Might. And then we have 3 Valkyrie Enforcer, because we already have so many 3 power cards and we only have limited space. And since we also have Desert Marshal for silence, I figured 6 silence is a decent number, together with all the removal, and that we can ignore some stuff. That should be fine. Like Combrei, for example, runs 8 of these guys because they have no stuff like Torch to deal with early annoying units like Argent Port and Pyro Knight, or say Oni Ronin and stuff like that. We can just torch them occasionally and don't have to silence them all the time. Then we have our first weapon, Vodakhan Staff, the kind of least spectacular weapon, but also the cheapest weapon, and another nice flood protection card in the late game if we draw a couple too many power cards. We just can get back staffs that have gone to the void earlier because the unit got killed or traded in combat and stuff like that. Then we have our 4-drops, Copperhall Elite, the last Aegis guy, pretty beefy guy. Overwhelm gives him pseudo evasion, so that if he gets big with Warcry and weapons, that he actually can just trample over and deal damage to the opponent, and doesn't get like stalled by small throwaway units that the opponent might have to jump block. And yeah, the Aegis makes him hard to handle, especially given the fact that he's also multi-faction. So multi-faction and Aegis and his size makes it so that there's very few cards that can actually deal with it. Like this guy with a plate on it can basically only be answered by Feeding Time, Combust, and Death Strike, if I'm not mistaken. All the other things either are like temporary solutions, like bouncing or silencing him, or can simply not touch him, like Annihilate, Permafrost, Torch, Suffocate. All these things can't touch him. I guess Polymorph counts too, out of Shimmer Pack, as an option. And Shimmer Pack itself, if the Aegis can be popped before. Same goes for Polymorph. You always have to get through the Aegis first, which is great. And the other 4-drop is our last weapon, and our second weapon, not our last weapon. Hammer of Might. Other lists I've seen run weird stuff like Sandstorm Titan and even weirder Xenon Obelisk, which doesn't make any sense to me at all in this deck. the obelisk just doesn't add anything and doesn't even become very relevant before you hit 8 power, and has no synergy with the strategy. And Titan, while I get that Titan is the best 4-drop in the game and all, it just doesn't fit the strategy. Like, it doesn't make our Aegis guys bigger. It's just a big guy that is a good target for stuff like Annihilate, that otherwise is not very good against us, because our most of our mono-faction cards have Aegis or are multi-faction and stuff like that. And same with Suffocate, like our small guys either have Aegis or grow quickly thanks to weapons and stuff. So yeah, Titan just is kind of the best removal would kind of be the best removal target in the deck, and also has like no synergy with the strategy, while Hammer of Might is a great thing to curve Familiar into a hammer, or even Elite into a turn 5 hammer, or slap it on one of our earlier units. Even the Siraf is great, like Siraf into hammer gives us a 6-7 trample, a 6-7 overwhelm, and we get the Warcry trigger, which makes our next unit big. Like if this, for example, gets hit by the Warcry trigger, we have a 7-7 overwhelm Aegis, which is great for 4 power, stuff like that. It just synergizes very well with the deck and gives us more ways to keep pushing, which is something the deck really needs, because it starts a little slow, so the stuff that we play later on needs to apply pressure right away, which is why I think Hammer is so much better than Titan, and Obelisk just doesn't make any sense at all. And last but not least, we have the card we are splashing for primary, Deepforged Plate. Like, double red is a pretty ambitious splash, but I have to admit, from the amount that I played the deck, the color-wise, the power is actually really great. Like, I rarely had issues playing Plate when I had 5 power, and I rarely had like color problems with the deck. The only cost basically of the splash is that the power development gets a lot more wonky. Like, there's a lot more depleted powers that you have to play depending on how your draw develops. But there's also draws where it's like basically free, because you open with a seed into like a Seek, then you have a couple of Sigils, and once you have your first unit out, these banners come into play undepleted and stuff. So there is definitely a lot of combinations of power draws where your power just flows smoothly and you don't even notice that you're playing heavy 3 factions. So that is really nice, but sometimes the development will be very wonky and slow for the power. But Plate, together with the endurance and the heavy punch it packs, can make up for that, especially on a Silverwing Familiar. Alternative options that I could see is, like, given how heavy that deck is focused around making a big Aegis weapon guy, is 1 or 2 additional Righteous Fury as like a way to control races, because sometimes against faster decks like Jiddo, if you don't find a Familiar, they can sometimes just race us before we race them, and we can't block enough to not die, but also can't kill them quick enough. So Righteous Fury can be really nice there. And we only have 4 life stealers so far, so having like a 5th or a 6th on a deck that basically builds one big monster can be really nice. Other than that, I think this list is pretty sweet. I only have like 20-ish games since I added Initiate or something, 10 to 20 games with Initiate, because I started without, but so far it played pretty nicely, and I think it's a good addition. And even if you like don't want to run Initiate, I would probably just run like a Force Marshal, a Force Valkyrie, and I don't know, like another Seek power and another power or something, or like another Seek power and a Righteous Fury or something like that. But yeah, I think Initiate is great. And yeah, the power base the minimum of 2 fire sigils that we need for the Seek powers to support our plate, as many time sigils as we can afford for our initiate. It might be possible that the third Justice sigil could also be a time sigil, but the deck is heavier Justice than time, so I didn't want to stretch it, and we have no double time, but we have double Justice on 3 with Valkyrie, so kind of went for the bit safer. And yeah, 5 time sigils, like I said. The minimum Justice sigils that we would need would be 2 for Plate and Enforcer to fetch with Seek power. So we can always get double green or double red from Seek. Then we have 5 banners. I tried to get as many banners in the deck as possible, since especially the green-red banner is perfect, because we don't need green-red on 1 necessarily. On 1 we mostly want time and occasionally fire for torch, so that's why I went for Seed of Impulse and Seed of Progress primarily, to max out the turn 1 time seeds for initiate, and the second priority was getting as many fire seeds in there for the occasional turn 1 torch, which is why there's 2 Seed of Glory as well. That gives us 8 turn 1 red for torch and 13 turn 1 white turn 1 time for initiate. It is possible that these could be something else, but I don't think so, because I rather have, since we can't have more Rakano banners, and I wanted more green-red duels, so Seed of Glory was the next best thing, because having more Praxis banners doesn't help. It doesn't help with turn 1 torch, it doesn't help with turn 1 initiate, and we already have a lot of time sigils, and the deck is much more heavy Justice than time, so Praxis banner is not very helpful, and playing Combrei banner doesn't make a whole lot of sense, because we already have a lot of time and Justice, and we need to get as many fire influence in the deck for Plate and Torch. So that's the explanation of the distribution. The power bases I've seen were 12 seeds and 3 banners, which doesn't make a whole lot of sense, because there's not that many sigils, and seeds are kind of worse in the deck because they're terrible top decks for our 4 and 5 drops a lot of the time, and the deck actually has a lot of units, so you often only need you can play banners easily on 1 depleted a lot of the time, especially in the lists without initiate, and then on 2 you just need a sigil or a seed with a sigil in hand, and after you play your 2 drop, a lot of the time from turn 3 or 4 onwards, the banners will be the perfect duels to curve out with, and drawing a Rakano banner off the top on 5 to drop our plate is a lot better than drawing a Seed of Glory that won't let us play our plate because we don't have a sigil in our hand and stuff like that. So that's pretty important. If there was more Rakano, if I could play more than 4 Rakano banners, these 2 would probably be more Rakano banners. But I think Seed of Glory is better than Praxis banner, and we need more red X duels, so that's why there's more Seed of Glories over more banners, even though I would rather play more banners if I could. But the distribution requires us to play Seed of Glory for that, because we need these 8 seeds for our initiative. So yeah, I hope that explains everything. I really think Voltron is kind of a neat nickname for that deck, given the analogy to the classic Voltron. This reference has even been made in the past in Magic for decks like Bogles, so this is kind of the same strategy for Eternal, and has the same kind of Voltron type analogy, maybe even more than in Magic with Bogles, because the guys are so much bigger and the colors and stuff. Just make a really big guy, like a really big monster, even bigger than the Bogles in Magic usually. Alright, as usual, if there's any questions, let me know in the comments. I'm happy to answer. I always read the comments and appreciate feedback and support. So see you in a moment with the first 3 games with the deck. Stay tuned.